What I saw for those kids was a really small future. I decided right then that day I would do anything to fix that, to build these kids a better life. So that night, I just went home and started Googling cheap houses. That was the main thing we needed, was a safe place to live. You guys, this is the fall of 2007. None of us had smartphones yet, so I'm Googling on the big family shared computer in the den. And right there, between all these real estate sites, there was a brand new website called YouTube. And that was the first time ever that all of us could go to one place and watch hundreds of videos about how to do something, like how to build a wall. And you already know what happened for every video I watched. 10 more videos popped up. That's the other way they get us. Well, it didn't take long for that new idea to kind of settle in. What if, instead of buying one of these broken down houses on the real estate sites and stacking my kids in bunk beds, what if the kids and I just buy all the supplies and we can put a house together ourselves? It'd be like a slightly larger than usual IKEA project. Of course, if I was going to build some kind of a castle where my kids would feel like kings and queens, I would need their royal approval. So I just sat my kids down around the dining room table and I asked them, if you guys could have any kind of a house, what would you build? Never ask your kids that. Jada wanted a hot tub as big as her room. Hope, just a replica of the Oval Office, please. Drew starts designing a zip line out his bedroom window. And they all said, we have to have a Harry Potter cupboard under the stairs. So of course, hearing these ridiculous ideas, right away I'm thinking, who raised these kids? Believing they can do these gigantic, over-the-top, impossible things. Oh yeah. No, the truth is, guys, that it was too late for anyone to put any obstacles in front of us, including me. Because I had already seen the way that just the idea of this house was changing those kids. It changed the way they walked, the way they sat. It changed what they believed was possible for them. We just wanted a better life. We wanted a safe life. There's no better way to feel safe than to just arm really small children with power saws and nail guns. You guys, we didn't know how to build a house. I didn't even know how to start with a foundation. But I had this idea that as long as we had YouTube, this was going to be fine. I mean, I could just go to YouTube and I could watch a dozen videos about how to set one foundation block. And all I had to do was go out to the construction site and do that like 1,500 times. And if I did that over and over, eventually we'd have a house. Obviously, I didn't go into this with a long list of strategies for how I was going to make it work. In fact, I had one strategy through the entire build, and that was that I was never again in my life going to be standing in a position where I was waiting for something better to happen, where I was taking little bitty baby steps and pretending they would add up to something big. At every single decision point for the rest of my life, my default reaction would be to immediately take action, to take big action. So within days of having the idea, maybe we should build a house, I went out and I bought an empty acre of land. The kids and I started clearing it, we dug and poured a footer, and then I just called and ordered 1,500 concrete blocks to figure out how to build the foundation. The kids and I all went out there to meet those blocks. Guys, it was freezing cold. It's December, and this whole site was ankle deep in mud. The oldest kids and I had put plastic bread bags on our feet that morning, like Home Pride and Sara Lee, and then put old tennis shoes on. We didn't even have rubber boots. Before that project, every pair of my boots had high heels. So we're out there that day, and the kids were cocky. They're strutting around the job site like, no problem, build a house. This is going to be easy. We've got this. High five. But me, standing there in front of the biggest project of my life, and my kids looking at me like I knew how to build a house. That was the first moment I felt a little bit of flutter of nerves over this project, just over the scale of what we were about to do. So I started pacing the job site, giving myself little pep talks. Like, I'd already talked a bank. After many banks and credit unions, I had talked a loan officer into giving me all the money to buy the supplies to build this house. And after he heard that it was going to take every last penny just to buy the supplies, so of course we wouldn't be able to decide partway through, this is too hard, and hire people to come in and do it for us, he decided to put me in a high-risk category with a 9-month construction loan. Now that meant I had 9 months to pass all my city inspections, my bank inspections, get the certificate of occupancy while I was working full-time and my kids were in school. Or we'd default on that loan. And if we defaulted on that loan, the bank could take the land that I'd bought, however much of the house I'd managed to build. The stakes were high. The pressure was high with that kind of a deadline. But as long as I stuck to this really careful schedule I'd made in an Excel spreadsheet, it had alternating pink and lavender lines. It was lovely. I hung it on my refrigerator. And according to that schedule, it wouldn't even take 9 whole months to build a house. I started to relax. We've got this. Goofing around with the kids. And then those blocks showed up. Now, you guys, in my head, 1,500 concrete blocks was going to be like 2 stacks. In reality, that was 2 flatbed trucks. Dozens of pallets of blocks and these pallets of 80-pound bags of mortar mix and a forklift to unload all of it, which the drivers did in like 10 minutes. Then they got one look at my face and fled the scene. But remember, I had already established my default reaction at every decision point for the rest of my life, no matter how far in over my head I get, is going to be to take action. So I walked over and I just picked up one of these blocks. They're a lot heavier than they look, by the way. And I carried it down to the lowest part of the foundation where it was too muddy for forklifts. And I just went back and got another one. I still remember my kids just kind of standing there, waiting for some kind of an instruction or an apology. But they eventually joined me, and you can see we moved all of these blocks so they were right up next to that footer that we'd poured, right next to where they'd need to be cemented in place. Now, imagine what that felt like. You guys, this entire thing was a sketch my kids and I had made around the dining room table a couple of weeks before. And here it was already taking the shape of a real house. It was so exciting. Well, until we figured out it's actually a really bad idea to put all those blocks right up next to the footer. And we'd have to move all 1,500 of them back a couple of feet. But even that, I told the kids, if you think about this in like a Karate Kid-like way, we're just building up muscle to move to the next step. Be like wax on, wax off, block here, block there. My kids didn't think that was funny either. Pretty sure they didn't crack a smile when I pointed at those 80-pound bags of mortar mix we'd have to move next. We'd have to take all of that mortar and mix it with sand and water in order to stick the blocks together. Now, it was my job to get water on site, because guys, I was the official plumber of record. You already know how I got that title, don't you? How to do plumbing. And then I just walked into the local permit office. You guys, this is totally legal. Walked into the permit office and just said, I'm going to run all my own sewer lines, water lines, and gas lines. They will just hand you a permit. You can imagine my kids' faces when they learned I was running the gas lines. And standing there with a shiny new permit and my exceptionally high level of plumbing expertise, you know how that felt. Well, felt like I was locked in a cage with a wild tiger. I was scared out of my mind. You guys, to hook my water line into the city main, I would have to cut the water off to hundreds of people. And I'd have to bore a hole under the street. And this lady at the permit office had told me real casual like, if y'all collapse a street doing that, y'all gotta build a new street. City governments have a you break it, you bought it policy. And you can imagine that's the day right there that I made the biggest mistake of this entire build. Because I looked at that water line and I said, that looks really scary. I think I'll just put it off and go do something else over here. But of course I had to have water in order to mix the mortar. My neighbor had a pond. What if the kids and I just hiked down the hill with 5-gallon pails to that pond in December and January, scoop up some water, hike back up, dump it in wheelbarrows, and just, hand mix all the mortar to set these 1,500 blocks? I'm not scared of a pond or a little bit of water in a pail. Now, whether you've ever been on a construction site in your life or not, I bet you can tell that's a terrible idea. And I didn't know it at the time, but what was happening in my brain between these options of running a water line or hiking down to a pond is the most common procrastination problem we all have. And it's actually not our fault. It's the way the primitive part of our brain is set up to work. Of course, what is our fault is not learning how to redirect ourselves. And I'll show you how the kids and I did that, but here's how this works. The primitive part of your brain has one job: to keep you alive. So when it receives the message that you're scared, sweat dripping down the back of your knees, tummy flutters, jaw clenched, the primitive part of your brain doesn't stop to say, wait, is the thing scaring you a wild tiger? Or is it a meeting in the boardroom? Or is it a skinny little water line? To the primitive brain, they're all tigers. It's the same physical response. So the primitive part of your brain, when it receives scared, it screams, run. And then once it gets you away from the scary thing, all the teeth and claws, it tries to help you burn up all of the adrenaline that fear created by doing some kind of work it knows won't eat you. And that's the stage in your project when your desk gets really clean. All your spreadsheets are color-coded, or you haul a few 100 pails of water from your neighbor's pond. Anything to keep you away from the tiger. The problem is, in our modern jobs, the scary thing is exactly what we should be doing. And successful people have just learned to interrupt that process, to recognize what's happening, interrupt it so you can use all of that adrenaline to do the hard thing. Now, my kids and I didn't know any of that. So we went all in with the busy work. We hauled enough water, mixed enough mortar to set all 1,500 of these concrete blocks. Took 40 days. To do what my spreadsheet said, 1 weekend. And then I called that city inspector who said he'd be happy to come by and sign off so we could move to the next stage, get the next draw from our construction loan. He'd come by and do that just as soon as, but you know what's coming here, as soon as I ran my water line. How many of you have ever done that? Just put it off until you're absolutely backed into a corner and have to do the thing that you should have just done in the first place. And then you figure out, it really wasn't that big of a deal. You guys, running that water line, cutting the water off, drill, cut, clamp, glue, that whole thing took me 1 hour. 1 hour, and at the turn of a faucet, we had water. And a pretty valuable lesson. That we had to find a way to just do the hard stuff, that I had to interrupt that process that was happening and redirect my adrenaline toward doing these things, or the kids and I would end up wasting hours doing busy work. And the bank would end up owning my house. Now, I found a way to interrupt this process, and it was so easy, you guys. It was one question, and it works every single time.